Nuclear war wouldn't just be another tragedy in the history books. It would end history as we know it, splitting time into everything that came before and the silence that follows. In the worst-case scenario, a large-scale nuclear exchange would create an apocalyptic chain reaction. Fires would rage across entire continents, incinerating tens of thousands of square kilometers. Hundreds of millions could die within hours. But the real nightmare comes after the blasts. Because what follows isn't just radioactive fallout. It's a nuclear winter, a massive disruption of Earth's climate so severe that it could starve billions. It might even destroy our civilization altogether. So how exactly does that happen? And what would a world plunged into nuclear winter actually look like? When fire becomes climate. A nuclear detonation creates something terrifying. A bubble of plasma hotter than the surface of the sun. In an instant, buildings, people, forests, everything within several kilometers are vaporized or set ablaze. Then comes the shockwave, flattening everything in its path. The air itself becomes a weapon, exploding outward and blowing apart entire cities in seconds. This is how you turn cities into furnaces. But the most dangerous effect isn't the explosion, it's the fire. When cities burn, they don't just smolder, they create firestorms, huge, self-sustaining infernos that suck in oxygen and ignite everything around them. The air becomes a tornado of flame. The heat is so intense, it creates its own weather system. Massive towers of smoke and soot rise into the sky, eventually forming something called a Pyrocumulonimbus cloud, basically a thunderstorm of fire. These clouds are no ordinary clouds. They can punch into the stratosphere, far above the level where rain clouds form. And that's critical, because in the stratosphere, nothing removes the soot. There is no rain to wash it out. It just sits there, for years. If this happens once, to one city, it's horrific, but localized. But in a full-scale war involving hundreds or thousands of nuclear weapons, we'd see hundreds of firestorms. Together, they could loft up to 150 million tons of black carbon soot into the upper atmosphere, enough to create a global shadow. Imagine a skyscraper made of smoke, the size of Mount Everest, multiplied 100 times. That's what would hang over the planet. When the sun stops showing up. Once the soot is up there, it begins blocking sunlight. This doesn't look like Hollywood apocalypses where the sky goes black. It's more subtle and more devastating. Even a small decrease in sunlight changes everything. Photosynthesis slows, temperatures drop, rain patterns shift. But this wouldn't be a small change. This would be a sudden, sharp global winter. From one day to the next, summer disappears. Temperatures in the world's most fertile regions drop well below freezing and stay that way for years. The Earth is plunged into a long twilight, famine on a global scale. The most dangerous effect of nuclear winter isn't the cold itself. It's what it does to our food. Nearly all the calories we eat come from plants that need sunlight and rain to grow. And most of those crops grow in a narrow belt of land in the mid-latitudes, places like the US Midwest, Ukraine, China, and Europe. These are the breadbaskets of the world, and in a nuclear winter, they would stop producing food almost overnight. Imagine wheat and cornfields buried under snow in July. Imagine no harvests for 5, maybe 10 years. Even if some food still grows in the tropics or the far south, it wouldn't be enough. Global food production could drop by 80 to 90%. And here's the scary math. Humanity stores only a few weeks' worth of calories in reserves. If food stops being produced, we run out almost immediately. Countries would hoard what little food they have, exports would stop, prices would soar, and in places that rely on imported grain to survive, mass starvation begins within months. Up to 5 billion people could die from hunger in just a few years. That's more than half the global population. And that's not the only problem. Our entire food system is built on industrial infrastructure. We need fertilizer made in chemical plants. We need diesel fuel for tractors. We need spare parts, ports, warehouses, and global shipping networks. If the countries that built and maintain that system are bombed into ruin, everything collapses. No chemicals, no fuel, no trade, no machines. Even places untouched by the war would be dragged down by the ripple effects. Modern agriculture doesn't work without modern civilization. What would a real war look like? So, what's the actual risk today? Scientists mostly study two nuclear scenarios: a regional war between India and Pakistan, and a global war between Russia and NATO or China and the US. A limited conflict between India and Pakistan might involve 50 to 100 nuclear bombs. It would kill tens of millions within hours. The resulting fires wouldn't cause a full nuclear winter, but could trigger a nuclear autumn, a milder climate disruption that could still threaten hundreds of millions with famine. But both countries are expanding their arsenals. A larger war with hundreds of nukes could create enough smoke to cause an actual nuclear winter. Up to 2 billion people might die from starvation. Then there's the unthinkable, a global thermonuclear war between the US, NATO, Russia, and possibly China. In this nightmare scenario, thousands of nuclear weapons are launched in a matter of hours. Over 360 million people die instantly. Entire countries are vaporized. And then the winter begins. With climate collapse, food collapse, infrastructure collapse, it becomes hard to see how civilization survives. We're talking about a mass extinction-level event caused not by nature, but by ourselves. Could anywhere survive? No place is truly safe. But some countries in the southern hemisphere, like Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, or parts of southern Africa, might endure. They are far from likely targets. They rely more on livestock than crops. Their winters would be less severe, and they have lower populations relative to food supply. But they'd likely be cut off from the rest of the world. Trade would stop. Refugees might arrive by the millions, and they'd face hard choices: protect their borders or try to help a dying planet. What can we do? One thing is clear: this must never happen. The risk is real, but it's preventable. We can support non-proliferation treaties. We can pressure governments to reduce their arsenals. We can educate ourselves and others.